Hello, I'm Roy Burley.
And I'm Esther Branco Diaz, and welcome to part 2 of how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now.
And today we're going to be talking about shame and guilt.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Roy.
Hi, Esther,
Good
and
to see
everybody.
you. Yeah, and everyone. Welcome if you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook Live. It's great to have you with us. Make sure you give us a little wave. So this is Trust Talks. We started last week with our first part of how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now. And we were talking about trauma last week. So I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that video. You can still watch it and catch up after our discussion tonight. You can find it on our YouTube channel for those of you on Facebook. But tonight, Roy, we're talking about shame and guilt, aren't we?
Yeah.
Another big subject. And I was saying to you just now, I feel like I've possibly got a degree in this subject, having lived through a lot of shame. We're going to be sharing a bit more of our stories tonight, aren't we, Roy?
Yes.
We'd love it if you could come along on this journey with us tonight while we chat through some difficult things. That's what we do at Trust Talks. We talk about some really sensitive issues, and we're not holding back this evening. So give us a wave if you're watching. We can't see who's joining us because we are live streaming on both YouTube and Facebook. So give us a wave or send us a little comment to let us know that you're there. We're really pleased to have you with us. And to those of you who weren't here last week, hello and welcome. It's a real privilege to have you join us. So, Roy,
Yes.
last week you talked about quite a bit about your childhood growing up. You were really honest and open in sharing with us some real difficult stories from your past on this subject of trauma that we were looking at last week, which really impacted me. And I know it's impacted others who have been watching over the past week, the episode that we did. Because you spoke about your childhood, you talked about the violence that went on when you were growing up, your dad having real mental health struggles and you being a witness to that, and the passing away of your sister. There was some real difficult stuff that you were very bold and courageous in sharing. And I shared about sexual abuse when I was growing up and the loss of my mum. And really on this theme, this subject, this series that we're looking at, how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now, we're kind of going through the stages in a sense. We started with trauma, then we're moving on to shame and guilt, and that's how we're going to go along in this series. And how trauma often then leads to shame and guilt.
Yeah.
So some big stuff that you shared. Thank you for that. Thank you for those who are giving us a wave. Hi, Lee in Wales. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Lee, Hannah.
Thanks for
Yeah,
giving us
and
a wave.
I think thank you, Esther, as well for sharing. And being so honest and open.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it, Roy? But
No.
the hope of Trust Talks is that it might help other people who are struggling with some of these issues. It might just be one person watching or listening who's going through some of these really big things and is feeling quite hopeless. Then the purpose of Trust Talks is to help build hope in others so that they can move into a life of freedom and purpose. So that's why we're doing this. Hi, Linz. great to see you. Thanks for joining us. We're just picking up some comments of those
Hi,
who are
Lynn.
live. So yes, this subject, shame and guilt. I know last week I gave a definition, Roy, and you laughed, didn't you, about it?
No, I think it's great. I like these definitions.
In fact, actually, I should just say it's really good to see you with your glasses on, Roy, because last week, everyone, I made Roy take his glasses off because there was a reflection and then he couldn't really see. And now I've let him put his glasses back on so he can see what's going on. So yeah, I'm gonna give you some definitions of shame and guilt, but I've stolen these from Brené Brown. For those of you who know about Brené Brown, she's an amazing speaker, researcher, author, and she sort of majors on shame, really, doesn't she, Roy?
Yeah, amazing.
And she differentiates between the two, between shame and guilt. And I like the way that she explains it, because she says that guilt is when you say, oh my goodness, that thing I did was really stupid. Whereas shame would say, oh my goodness, I am so stupid that I did that thing.
Yeah.
So the onus is on, one of them is the action that I did was stupid, and the other is totally identifying that you are stupid, or whatever it is that you feel.
Yeah.
And I think that really does a good job of explaining. She does it better than me, but of what the difference is between the two. So we're going to expand on these things a bit more this evening. But first of all, we wanted to say thank you so much to those of you who have sent comments to us this week, who have given us feedback, who've just encouraged us, because we've had some really great feedback, haven't we, Roy?
Yeah, it's been amazing. And it's touched our hearts quite deeply, hasn't it, Esther? And but one of the things I need to say, Esther, is one of the comments was we needed to hear more of Esther, and when we first talked about doing trust talks, we were going to tell your story first, and sorry, and you said to me, you kind of switched it suddenly, and you said, Roy, could we do your story? And you was very apprehensive, and I could see that, and I didn't say a whole lot to you, Esther, because I know that this is not easy. But can you remember why that was? Why, what was happening?
What was happening last week?
With you, with like, no one wants to listen to me kind of thing, like that voice. Because I think what's important, shame says, shut up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what I want to hit that point right at the beginning. Shame says, don't say anything. And particularly in the background where there's been abuse and the predator, he never wants anyone for you to tell anyone what's happened. So he's done all, or she, but mainly he, have done all they can. So you never speak. So even when you're trying to speak now, you're in a battle. So I just wanted to hit that first, if I could. No one wants to listen to you, sort of thing, that voice.
I'll explain actually sort of what was going on internally last week when it came to my point of sharing. And it's quite interesting that sharing about what happened to me growing up as a child and being sexually abused is not actually so much the difficult part, because there's been a lot of healing in my heart there. What was difficult for me is, like you said, there's that internal voice saying, shut up. But actually it was screaming in me, and it usually is screaming in me, shut up.
Was that last week even?
Yeah, last week. Wow. And I don't know if you noticed last week when I was sort of saying about things that I saw when my mum was terminally ill and passed away, and I quickly condensed it and apologized for any graphic, detail. Because what's going on inside me is that shut up. Nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Who wants to hear about sexual abuse? I mean, come on, nobody. And that's more of the struggle than verbalizing what happened to me, or things that
Yeah.
I've experienced in my life. And I think that's the powerful thing about shame, is that very often the events, the trauma that occurred, it happens and it's over. But shame
Mm.
is the power source that continues that locked up life.
Right.
Um, and I don't know if that you would say that's true for you with the things that you
Yeah.
experienced, but
Yeah.
it's shame that's actually causes the long term effect. So
Definitely.
for me, that silence and that shut up goes back to, like you said, being abused, being groomed, being made to believe that the things that happened to me were because I was evil and I was wrong, and I needed to shut up about it. No one would believe me. No one wants to know. Nobody cares. If anyone finds out, you'll be to blame. You'll be punished, and you need to be silent about it. And as I shared last week, that worked up until I was almost 30 years old.
That's like
Um,
programming, Esther. Like
yeah,
you had that. The abuser does that continuously, and because it's your whole your first 10 years of your life. I mean, you've got nothing to reason with. You just believe it, and it's
yeah,
almost written in your heart.
yes, it becomes part of your belief system. I think they say what you learn in the first 7 years of your life or something become fundamental foundations for belief in your
Right.
life.
Wow.
So, so that goes back to not being able to speak the truth. Um, so even now when I share, it's really difficult, um, because I'm believing in my heart that I should be quiet and nobody wants to know. So that's more the struggle. And I guess because shame became my identity for the majority of my life. Um, and the effects that shame has had on my life. I've made some notes about it actually, because I was thinking about it this week. Okay, what is everything that what are all of the effects that shame has had on my life? And or abuse, maybe to be specific about it, is never feeling clean, never feeling innocent or pure, blocking out everything, every trauma that happened to me, and trying to live a life of containing this pain and suffering inside of me, being made to feel that I was always to blame, feeling disgusted with myself, believing that I needed to be punished, never being able to speak, um, being moldable by
Mm.
anyone in my life. Um,
Can I
then,
say something on there, Esther, just with the
yeah,
moldable bit?
yeah,
Because one of the things that like you just joked a minute about the quote, like from the dictionary,
yeah,
and I realized working with you, Esther, that I have to be a little bit careful when I say something, um, that you don't take it like that the wrong way almost. Like I'll say something to improve it and critique it, but I realized often I have to kind of say first to you, Esther, I think it's a good idea. This is a good idea, but can I add this because of this? And if I don't do that, suddenly you're unsure about your a real good idea, and you will just take what I say and go with that.
yeah, completely. And I feel like I've lived like that my whole life. And just to clarify, so when you say, oh, maybe it should be like this, it's not an offense that I feel of like,
Mm,
oh, he wants to do it differently. It's a total um, being moldable by people, because I don't feel like I ever get it right, and I think that comes from a life of never really knowing yourself.
right.
When um, when you're a child and bad things happen to you, and you are groomed, that's like being molded.
Yeah.
It sets you on a path of never really knowing what's the right thing to do to not be in the bad books. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
But that is no way to live your life, because it leads to more problems. And that was another effect then of shame in my life, from was even in my adult life having very unhealthy, abusive relationships, um, because I was always full of shame,
yeah,
and riddled with self hatred, um, and really programmed to think that way.
yeah,
And I would like to say, oh, I'm totally free of all of those things. Um, but some of those are still a struggle for me.
yeah,
And, we're on the road to um, always working through some of those things.
yeah.
So I became shame. That's how I think about
Hmm.
myself before. I wore it, I thought it, I was it, like I had a cloak of shame over me. I believed I was the scum of the earth, filthy, dirty, good for nothing. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm not,
Can
I'm
I,
not, I'm not lightening up for you.
can I jump in there, Esther? Because I think I'm glad that you said we still struggle, that we haven't arrived, we haven't got this massive um, formula that makes everything better, but we have learned a few things on the journey that have helped us walk in greater freedom. And so we're not these professionals. We don't even, we're just going on a journey together, and we're inviting you all, and we thank you for encouraging us and coming with us. We want to take you on a journey, and we really want to take people on a journey that don't have hope, that think that's it, I can't make it. And that's why we're sharing our stories. But can I ask you a little bit about when you went to abusive relationships? Because I think that's quite common, isn't it? That someone who has this written on their heart, the shame, the blame, all of that stuff, they're so identified with it
Mm,
that they actually, there's also, for some, a feeling of a need to be punished. None of this is conscious. It's not like
yeah.
you could have seen any of this. It's just so written in the heart, so much in the subconscious that we just do this. Could you say something about that, Esther? Put a bit of light on that, do you think?
Yeah, I can try. I think it's very complex because,
Yeah,
like you said, it's not a conscious decision. I can remember in my 20s and 30s, um, having relationships with men who were very abusive, and I can remember thinking, what is it about me that attracts these kind of men? Um, but looking back, I believe it was me that was drawn to that, which sounds very, very odd. But when you've been made to believe since day one that you should be punished, that you're evil, that nobody's going to love you, you're all your worth is certain bad things. Um, it's all you know,
yeah,
um, and you are, on the one hand, um, you're easy prey for predatory people,
mm,
because there's something about you that's very moldable. I think that's, like I was saying earlier. But also, there's something about predatory people that it's what you know. I
yeah,
don't really know how to explain it other than
yeah,
that. And there's something inside of you when you are believing that you are all the things that you're told, that you cannot receive healthy, good love
yeah.
anyway. And that's been a
Your
struggle.
heart can't receive it. It's like you don't
Absolutely.
deserve it. This is what I deserve.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with you. It's all to do with a belief system that's kicked into place from an early age. And I
Yeah.
think this is helpful for some people, because even just bringing a little bit of light in this, people, some people are in toxic relationships, not just with partners, but with bosses, with pastors, with people of authority or people of influence, and they are moldable, and they're not fully aware, and they're suffering in these relationships. And I think just throwing a little bit of light can at least give a bit of awareness to say, actually, you're not the problem.
And I can remember, times in my life having been, as an adult, thrown down the stairs or beaten, or and laying there on the floor, and this inner struggle of something in your heart hopes for better, and something in your heart also won't allow you to pursue that.
Wow.
And I don't know if anyone else listening to that who might be in that situation can identify with that. But there is a way forward. There is a way to a better life.
Amen.
These things can be broken. They can change. And that little part of your heart that identifies with somewhere, even in the smallest little place, I want better than this. Hold on to that.
Yeah,
well, better than that.
Yeah.
But these are difficult subjects to talk about, Roy.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important to talk about shame?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it is difficult. Some people are not even able to listen to a whole. Like someone said to me that it's difficult even to listen to one of your programs last week. And I can understand that, because going down these roads immediately triggers feelings, emotions, especially if you've suffered trauma and stuff like that. For people that have never suffered it, it may just be very interesting. But people that have been there, these programs can be quite, it can really stir up stuff.
Yeah.
And I've noticed just through last week's program, so many people have got in contact with me. So there's a real need. This is stirring something up. So why is it important? I think we've got to go back to the basics, and that truth makes free, in the words I think of Christ, that when we come to the place of truth, we come to the place of freedom. But the journey to truth is facing that which is true. And facing that which is true is the trauma. It's facing the trauma. It's facing the shame. It's facing the blame. Is looking at and allowing myself to feel and experience that which in my childhood I hid, I locked away, I did not allow myself to feel so I could survive. But now as an adult who needs to not be a child anymore, who needs to progress and come into purpose, I have to be able, I need help, I need permission to be able to look at that and to discover what is true. So I think, the reason that I think shame for me is the hardest one, and guilt is the hardest one. But I think it just goes back to what we've been saying, that we have to come to a place of truth. But the wonderful thing, Esther, and this to me is the most important thing. The wonderful thing about truth is what's happened to you isn't you. What you've done, in this world, whether that's created guilt and shame, it's not you. And I kind of know this. Like there's something in me. This isn't a theology for me. Can I just say this real quick, Esther? Where I really saw it. Some of you know I had the coronavirus and I was in the hospital, and I got to a point I couldn't breathe. I could hardly breathe. I was so weak. I had these crazy fevers and so on, and I didn't know whether I was coming out. But I remember one of the things that happened, Esther, is eventually I got so weak that I couldn't even, we're Christians, so we pray, I couldn't even pray. I couldn't even pray the name Jesus. I tried, I couldn't. It took too much out of me. I did not have the strength. But one thing I saw, and I'll never forget this, is I saw the real me. And I saw someone who was kind, someone who was gentle, someone who was peaceful, someone who cared. I was looking at other people suffering, and I cared about them. And I realized that what life has done, and often the mind, is overlaid in our experiences and what happened. It overlays us with a false truth, a false identity. And so we
Mhm.
never see our true self. And I was privileged in that horrible situation, which was traumatic, by the way,
Yeah.
um, to see my true self.
Mm.
And so I really do feel this is important. If we could go on a journey to look at what's true, but no, that's not where we're going to camp.
Mhm.
We're going to go there, but it's not the destination. It's just what we got to go through. And then we're going to come to a place where we are free because of who we really are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's hard in a short space of time to really unpack all of what you're saying. But we are going to expand on this as the weeks go on, so it will make better sense. And actually, maybe we can go through, together. What does that actually mean? How
Yeah,
do we do it?
yeah, yeah,
um, but but this is the point, and this is the thing about shame. It's not the real you. And when
yeah,
we're covered in shame, what we do is identify with it and make it who we are. And it's not who we are. That's basically what you're saying. It's
yeah,
what's happened to us. Um, but I wanted to read, Roy. I'm coming back to Brené Brown again because
yes,
her book, Daring Greatly, has been a really important, helpful book. If you haven't read it, anyone watching or listening, we would recommend. Actually, you'd read it first, Roy, and suggested it to me, and it's a really powerful book.
yeah,
And the title Daring Greatly is based on this quote, which she takes from Theodore Roosevelt. And I'm just going to read it to you. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he knows he fails whilst daring greatly,
yeah,
so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory or defeat. And I just loved that quote. And I thought it was quite relevant for this evening because it kind of relates to what we're doing now, Roy.
yeah,
Don't you
yeah,
think?
definitely. Yeah, I love it as well. And we may fail on this journey,
Yeah,
Esther, but we are daring greatly and we're encouraging others to do the same.
yeah,
Um, but we're not we feel like we've got something to offer. We don't have all the light. We all see darkly. We have a little bit of light that we want to share. And we're in the arena now. And if you get into the arena, you're going to be criticized. Not people have been kind to us, but not everyone's going to be kind.
yeah.
And and it's because of that book. um some of my friends sent me that book and said, Roy, read this book. And because of it, this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, Esther. And it started some of you might have seen my little videos last summer in lockdown that I made in the garden with my 12-year-old son back then.
Yeah.
And I some of my friends, like, I because for a long time, Esther, I didn't even, because of shame, I wasn't on Facebook or social media. I mean, I was like the dinosaur. I always said to people, I should have just been born in the 1800s. Like, and it was mainly because of shame, Esther. I didn't want to
Mm,
be out there. I didn't want to get in touch. I didn't want my face to be here now. I didn't want to do what I'm doing. I'll be honest. I just wanted to hide, because that's what trauma does. That's what shame does. It just says hide, like Adam when he sinned. Just get some fig leaves and get out the road. And so I did that for a long time. But people encouraged me, friends encouraged me, and I would send them my little videos, and they say, Roy, they're great. Just send them out there. So I did. And some of my friends and that from work back in the day, they just laughed, and I had to suffer ridicule. But it's okay, because I laughed at myself. I thought I am ridiculous, but I am me, and I'm going to get into the arena. And that's what I'm doing. And that's what we're doing tonight, Esther. We're trying to get into the arena. We're trying to tell people, listen, we haven't got it together. I still struggle. I still have all the struggles that I always had.
mm,
But there is a difference. Can I say this, Esther? When I lived in Cambridge, and we used to feed the homeless on the streets, you remember?
yeah.
And it started. I would walk, and I would see all these drunks on the streets, and I felt like I need to just reach out to them. But what was an encouragement to me, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, Esther, there goes I, but for the grace. Like, it wasn't a wonder. I knew I'm that drunk. I saw myself, and I also saw myself probably dead as well, because I was a little bit extreme in everything I did. So
Mm-hmm.
I may not have even made it that far, but I knew I wouldn't have a home, a wife, a family. I would not be functional. I would have to sit on the streets. I would drink. I would take drugs. I could see myself
Yeah.
100% in those people.
Yeah.
So, and I remember I was walking along looking at these drunks and homeless people and people on drugs. And at the time I was feeling so condemned, because I thought, man, I'm supposed to be a Christian. I'm still struggling. I still got all
Mm-hmm.
these sins. I still got all this inner struggle, and I'm not overcoming. And I felt God say, you may not have made it to where you want to be, but look where you would be. And I knew it was the truth. And that's when me and you, I said, Esther, let's go feed the homeless. Do you remember? And we used
Yeah.
to go out.
Monday nights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do, and I can relate to that completely differently. But I've always had a heart to work with women and children who've been trafficked in different parts of the world. We're obviously doing that in the Philippines, but I could so identify with these people. I don't mean that in an offensive
Yeah.
way, but I thought if it wasn't for the fact that I was born into a moderately well-off family, or if it wasn't for the grace of God, my life would have been going down a very, very different path. And I think sharing that quote about daring greatly is not to blow our own trumpets, but like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we've got it sorted and we're doing this. It's about being vulnerable and sharing our stories, sharing our struggles means that we have to be vulnerable. And in order to look at what's happened to you in the past, it does require you to be vulnerable. And I think that's what scares a lot of people. I don't want to look at this thing because
Yeah.
it's going to hurt me even more, it's going to damage me even more, it's going to affect me even more. But the opposite of that is
Yeah.
true, I found. Um, Instead of blocking it and caging it up, and I'm not ever going to go there in my mind, it's we've been doing the opposite of that, and it works. Um, yes, and shame, really, what I've experienced in my life, shame stifles purpose.
Yeah.
Shame prevents you from living a life of freedom and a life of purpose, and that's that's the direction in that we're heading as we go on through the
Yeah.
weeks to share with you that that life is possible after a
Yeah.
life of shame.
Because one of the things to label, I think, Esther, is when we constantly hide something, what we're doing is we're not facing it. So it's there. So all my life I've been struggling. you know, but not wanting to face the struggle with any addictions or, you know, weaknesses in my heart. Because like all the time I'm saying, don't worry, don't look at that, because just be stronger, just be holier, fast more, pray more. You know, this is what we Christians do, you know, when we're
Yeah.
trying to be better. So I've never identified with that, because I always thought, no. So I've tried to almost make myself this perfect person, and so in a funny way, it's this other person has run along parallel with me, but I've never acknowledged it.
Mm.
I've never embraced it and said, this is true. This is true about me. Um, and so, yeah, so I just feel like that's an important thing, because what happens is, by not embracing it, it does create these other things, like the depression and the feeling low, like, because it gets locked up, like it doesn't go away. The body still carries it all, and the body only knows how to be true, Esther. It doesn't know how to lie. We weren't designed to lie. It's the mind that's lying. Like, don't look at it, it's not the truth, but it is the truth. It's not the truth, but it is true. Does that make sense? So,
So
so it
can I
comes out in
just,
other ways.
yeah, can I just clarify?
Yeah,
What you're looking at is what's happened to you.
yeah,
You're not identifying with that in terms of who you are.
yes.
Can we maybe just expand that? That's
Yeah,
what you mean.
that's
Is that
exactly
right,
it.
Roy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know, trauma and guilt, they are going to affect you in a certain way.
Mm.
They're gonna carry feelings, they're gonna carry thoughts, they're gonna carry stuff that you won't want to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
And so you push it away. So because you're pushing it away, they sneak into your life in different ways.
Mm.
So, you know, I think in psychology, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know all the terminologies, but I think they call it a neurosis. So like depression and behaviors and avoiding things and all, you know, so you get all these weird behaviors. And so you spend your life trying to suppress yourself and suppress all these things and to be okay. But eventually it just gets exhausting.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
you just run out, because you've been doing it your whole life. Now you're an adult, now you're in your 30s or wherever, you just don't have that much strength anymore.
Mm.
So does it make sense? So what you do is you say, okay, let's stare greatly,
Yeah.
let's look at it, let's allow ourselves to feel it, let's
Yeah.
experience what has happened
Yeah.
and why that's happened.
Yeah.
And so that's the valley of the shadow of death, if you like. But you're on your way to your true self.
Yeah.
I
The
hope that
truth
makes a bit more
is,
self.
the truth is, these things did happen to me.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's powerful, and we will expand more on these things in the coming weeks. I just want to go back actually to the difference again between shame and guilt,
yeah,
because depending what's happened in your life, what trauma you've experienced, sometimes you can feel one of these things, sometimes you can have both of these things. So, for example, with sexual abuse, for me, I had both of those things. I I carried the shame of it all, but also was made to believe that it was all my fault. Um, so, um, like we said right in the beginning, shame is identifying that what's gone wrong or the thing that's happened is because of you, that
yeah.
you identify with the thing that happened, whereas
It
guilt
is you.
is,
Yeah,
yes, it is you.
yeah,
Um, but guilt is just something that you might have done, not
yes,
who you are, if that
yeah,
makes sense. Um, so shame is a focus really on self, and guilt is a focus on behavior or
right.
something that's happened. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I did something bad.
Yeah,
And you touched on last week this guilt that you felt. after your sister passed away,
Yeah.
um, and dealing with the two different things with the shame and the guilt can be a completely different process.
Yeah.
I believe,
Yeah.
um, because we've mentioned how we've helped to process shame in our life, but could you share a little bit about how you deal with guilt, Roy?
Yeah.
Because guilt can still be all consuming. You
Yeah.
still can be living in the trauma of an event.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you could just share a bit.
Yeah. I think in my experience, and I think it's a good distinction actually, but my experience is how, do you remember when God really gave us a breakthrough, Esther? Because I think what people should know is that when we started feeding the homeless together, we decided to go on a journey because I said, look, Esther, I'm not a professional. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to walk with you and see if God does something.
Mm,
And so we went on this journey of just talking about what has happened to you. And I remember a real breakthrough one day was when I felt it was the Spirit that said, Esther, can you forgive the little girl, that little 10-year-old girl?
mm,
And I think, this seeing things in hindsight and judging things when we're looking at guilt, sometimes we judge things as an adult. So like in my case, I was 15 thinking I was a murderer
yeah,
because I wasn't a good brother.
yeah,
I would never put that on a 15-year-old.
no,
I would never do that. You would never judge a 10-year-old the way you've judged the 10-year-old within you. And I
yeah,
think when we deal with guilt, we've got to, one is, especially things that happen in your younger life, like, are you looking in the right perspective? Are you judging as an adult now, someone who just didn't know?
hmm,
They just, that's all you knew. Have mercy on yourself, you
yeah,
know? And the other thing is, even stuff as we do as adults that are wrong, hindsight is always wonderful. Like you mentioned, Esther, about when you was when you took the bandages off your mum.
yeah,
You felt such guilt and stuff but you didn't do it on purpose.
yeah,
Like, if you would have known that her skin was going to crack and all this, you wouldn't have done that.
yeah,
So it's being merciful.
hmm,
When Jesus died on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. Why? He said, they don't know what they're doing. They
mm,
well knew what they were doing, Jesus. They were crucifying you.
yeah,
That's not what he said.
mm,
There was something about where they were that
hmm,
they were not seeing it. They were not really seeing from the right perspective. So often when we deal with guilt, we've got to be fair and not unjust. I was so unjust with that 15-year-old boy. You were so unjust with that 10-year-old girl. You were
mm,
judging from an adult's perspective. But nevertheless, sometimes we're just bang out of order and we're wrong.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So, but for us, the only way I can deal with this, Esther, is from like our religious or Christian perspective, if I could say that a bit
yeah,
and
yeah,
bring
sure,
understanding. Because for us, and not all Christians know this, unfortunately, but for me, this is so powerful in my life. But I really trust that sacrifice that Jesus made. When
mm,
John saw Jesus, that was his cousin, John the Baptist, he says, Behold, have a look. This is the Lamb of God that will take away the sins of all the world.
mm,
So he saw a lamb that will take away everyone's sin. And that picture was first painted in the Old Testament. I'm sure everyone must have seen the Ten Commandments, back in the day. Um, and one of the things you see in the Ten Commandments is God's pouring out judgment's coming. But he said, everyone who's got the blood of the lamb on their doorposts and their lintels, he says, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over. That's where we get this word Passover or Easter, which we're coming up to. So, and the poor people in the house, they had to go outside and paint this thing on the outside and get in the house and trust the blood. They couldn't see it because this thing that Jesus did is nothing to do with you. It's not your valuation. This is the valuation of God and his son. And he has esteemed his son's blood higher than any sin as payment for whosoever believes this. Whoever puts it means put your trust in. So as a Christian, I have learned that Jesus, he forgave his enemy. And because he forgave his enemies, he became a sacrifice for all the sins of the world. So as a Christian, for my guilt, and it's every day, I trust this blood. And it works for me, Esther. You know, it really does work. So I don't really, I can only offer that for guilt from my perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then believing from that you're forgiven.
Yeah, I totally do. Because I don't think that my sin is that I don't think that the blood of Jesus is less valuable than my sin. And the reason is it's because it's not my evaluation. It's God's evaluation. God says, I value my son's blood more than all sin. And he says, when I see the blood, I will pass over. So I put it on the door of my heart, and I hope I always will, Esther.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's not a Christian, I get it. And if you felt like, well, what do? I would say, just ask Father, ask God, and just say, could you show me? Could you show me my forgiveness? Could you show it to me? And let me experience that forgiveness every day.
Yeah, and that can even just come with a simple sorry, because
Yeah,
actually that's the first response to guilt, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Like, this thing that I did was really bad or really dumb, and it doesn't matter on the size or portion of the deed. The first response to guilt really is, I'm sorry. And then, like you said, believing in that forgiveness and the power of it and the enormity of it. And like you said, for me, also, it was needing to forgive myself.
yeah,
And I think that also for a lot of people is sometimes a harder step than being sorry for the deed that you've done. The self punishment of
yeah,
there is a real need to forgive yourself
yeah,
for things that you've done, because you can just carry that on and continue it otherwise. And I think in my life, believing I was to blame for bad things that happened to me, I couldn't receive that freedom that you get in forgiveness because I was holding myself prisoner. Does that make sense, Roy?
yeah, 100%.
And unforgiveness and guilt does that. It locks you up. And that's how I feel I spent a lot of my life. And I'm still having to process
Yeah,
being kind to myself and
yeah.
forgiving myself. And I definitely have not mastered it yet.
I hated myself.
Yeah,
I hated myself.
yeah, me too.
But I'm beginning to love myself because I can see a different me.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good, Roy. That's powerful because a lot of people don't see their true self, and that can be a big obstacle. Um, well, I want to just open it up to anyone who's watching who wants to share their thoughts, feelings, questions, comments. We've talked about a lot of stuff here. I'm going to share a few. We've had a few comments coming in. Thank you so much for those. If you're watching, write us a comment. If you don't feel like saying anything, give us a like or a wave or a share. But let's just pick up on some of these comments. I'm sorry that if your comment was a little while ago, I can't see all of them. So please share your comment again. But I can see the last one here from Beverly, which is that she so agrees with you, Roy. The denying our true emotions thing in Christian circles can be really harmful. Our body keeps the score and it will have to come out. We need to create safe spaces to process so that those things don't fester. Also, by suppressing yourself, you are silencing yourself and your intuition, and you simply learn to not trust yourself, which is really true.
Yeah. You know, can I say something real quick on Bev's point?
Yeah.
There's a scripture, because I don't want people to get the wrong impression. I don't want people to think, just go and share everything with everyone and stuff like that. We're not saying that, and neither are we doing that.
Yeah.
The scripture's real clear. It says, humble yourself. Now, humility is owning truth. Humble yourself where? Under the mighty hand of God. That means under his direction. So where you feel the Spirit is saying to you, be honest. Be honest with yourself. Face it. Face the pain of it. Now, it's in Proverbs, it says, buy the truth. That means it costs, and sell it not. What does it cost? It's going to cost you your pride. Like, to come out here and do this, your pride goes down, whatever image you had of yourself and other people had,
Yeah.
So thank you, Bev. It's brilliant what you said.
Yeah, definitely. She made a comment earlier as well. I think when I was saying about how I identified with being treated badly, really, it was what I expected and what I aimed for, if that's what you like.
Yeah.
Because your brain feels safe with what you know.
Right.
It believes, well, this hasn't killed me, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Change is scary for the brain because it doesn't know if this new thing will be safe. Will I survive? Even though intellectually you may know that you want better. Unfortunately, I can't read all the rest of the comments. So, but that's so true. I'm glad that somebody else identifies with what I was trying to explain. Thank you, Bev, for your comments.
Really good, Bev.
Yeah, if anyone else has got any comments, yes,
So
definitely.
profound.
Please drop us a message now and we will share it. But otherwise, if you want to catch the future episodes of Trust Talks, make sure you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel at The Pure and Trust, and then you won't miss one of these. It'll be every Thursday at 7:30. Lynn's has sent a message. Thank you, Lynn's. Loving ourselves is massive. Would never be as harsh to a little child as I am to myself. Yet that is what I am to God, a little child. Trusting God, a bruised reed he will not break, in Isaiah 42 verse 3. That's so good. Thank you, Lynn. And this point actually, that you'd never be as harsh to a little child as you are to yourself. That is very true. And it took Roy in my life to make me aware of that, of this self-hatred that I've lived with my whole life, and this hatred of this little girl who allowed all this bad stuff to happen to her. And we are not we're not very kind to ourselves very often, and that's a good reminder, Lynn. Thank you. So thank you so much for joining us, those who've tuned in. Thank you to those who watch this later on. We really appreciate you taking your time and coming on this journey with us. Thank you, Roy, for all that you've shared and making it a safe space for me to share, or encouraging me to share. So we're really grateful to those of you who have been here with us. Next week, we're going to be talking about addictions, still on this theme of how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now. So again, we're not holding back, and we would love it if you could come and join us. And also want to just say a little thank you to Zephy and Aaron at Zephy, who hosts this for us, makes the technology happen. They've been an amazing support to us through the journey of the Pure and Trust, and they've also donated a Samsung Galaxy tablet. It's our 3rd birthday as a charity, And we're doing that in a giveaway. So you can head on over to our social media pages and enter our competition. So thank you, Zeffie, for all that you do for us
Yeah.
at Trust. And all that's left to say is thank you. And we will see you next Thursday, 7:30 for Trust Talks.
Good night.
Thank you for watching Trust Talks by the Purim Trust. To find out more about the work that we do supporting vulnerable women and children, you can go to thepurimtrust.org and get involved with building hope in the lives of those who need it.